And joining us now is Alan Palla, who is the Director of Research at the SANS Institute, a graduate degree granting institution and the principal cybersecurity training school. Alan directs SANS research programs, including the widely used Internet Storm Center, the Early Warning System for the Internet, and the annual Greatest Risks in Cybersecurity study. And Alan has testified several times before both the House and the Senate. Welcome to Background Briefing, Alan Palla.
Good to be here, Ian.
Well, thanks for joining us. And Chris Krebs, who basically made sure we had a very secure and safe election, who got fired by Trump because he spoke the truth about what a successful and secure election was, the most secure in our history. He testified today before the Senate, and the hearing itself was ridiculous because it was mostly conspiracy theories floated by the chair of the committee, Ron Johnson, and then the ranking member, Senator Peters, and Johnson got into a screaming match. But Krebs was the only one who made any sense, but I'm not sure he's being listened to. I mean, there seems to be there's no repercussions for the Russians for this massive hack that they've done. We are simply not only helpless, but unable to deter foreign actors from repeated attacks. I mean, we had the opium attack a while back by the Chinese. When are we going to wake up?
We are in very good shape on the very high end in terms of cyber offense and defense in certain military and intelligence areas, but we are way behind where we need to be for all of the other federal agencies, for many of the large organizations. And the reason is that we've underestimated the need for what are called hunters, and that's what you saw this week. The Russians made a bad mistake in attacking FireEye. If they had just stuck with the federal agencies, they wouldn't have run into any sophisticated hunters, and they wouldn't have been found.
So tell me what hunters are.
Oh, hunters are a type of cybersecurity person who is so steeped in the technology and in understanding the computers that she's watching or he's watching that she can find an anomaly. She can find traffic. And it's not that she's looking with her eyes, but she's so good at building filters. So we often call them hunters and tool builders because they're constantly writing new scripts that are looking for behaviors that are anomalous in different areas based on any kind of evidence they have. And they're just constantly cycling through their organization looking for bad guys who got in. We actually, the success of a hunter is called zero dwell time. So when you know that this attack has been in those federal agencies for months, that's called the dwell time. After the attacker gets in, he's got all that time to do damage. And if you can get dwell time to zero, then you're doing well. And the people who can do the work and build the scripts to get dwell time to zero are called great hunters.
So the SVR, the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service, hacked into via SolarWinds through this popular software called Orion, which has at least 18,000 users apparently were hacked into. And this dwell time started in as early as March, and it was only caught because of the Russians hacked into the prominent cybersecurity company FireEye, as you just pointed out. So the Russians have legions of people working in cyber espionage and cyber attacks, etc., a combination of intelligence people and criminals, and just a bunch of youthful hackers who are recruited. What's lacking on our side? Why can't we generate more hunters?
The reason that hunters are so hard to find, even though there are tens of thousands of people who are cybersecurity professionals, is that they're only 1 or 2% of all of those people. And what we have not done that the Russians have done, and the Israelis have done, is we haven't tested everybody. What the Russians do, and they have since 1985, is they actually run a class in the foundations of cybersecurity. Think of anatomy. For doctors, you're not going to make a doctor without anatomy. Well, what if you did a class for everybody in the country on anatomy, and you picked the 1 or 2% who are just awesome at knowing anatomy, and then only train those in the very high end? You'd have a huge number of hunters. That's what Russia does. Russia has 70,000 kids taking an advanced pre-cyber technology test every June, and about 60,000 of them pass it. Our tests are very lightweight. We're not finding the talent. Now, there is a new program called CyberStart America that is finding that talent, but it's just getting started. So we're going to catch up, but we're late.
So how many hunters do we have, and how many hunters would we need to prevent these further attacks like the OPM attack? They got all of the data on all of the employees of America's intelligence services, and that was bad enough. But then this recent data from this recent hack of SolarWinds, Orion's software, we don't even know. I mean, a whole bunch of government departments were hacked into, but we don't know whether, in fact, there was even more security breaches. But already, of course, we know that a lot of government departments were hacked into. So how many do we have, and how many do we need?
The best guess, it's about 4 years old. The number we have is around 1,700. Finding all of the centers where they work. The smallest number that we could use as a nation is about 30,000. And it's, if you want to cover the hospitals and other precious parts of the country, not just the critical government and the critical infrastructure, then it's probably, if it's just that, it's 30,000. If you're going to go and cover a lot of the other important industries, it's probably 60,000. The reason, it's very simply, and in order to do this, you really have to know your own environment. So you can't have one central hunter that deals with 50 different organizations, because she won't know enough about each organization to be able to find the bad stuff. So you basically have to have a couple in every organization, and that means we have to have a supply, and that's what this CyberStart America is trying to do, but it's not there yet.
Well, it is pretty extraordinary that we're behind the curve, and you just mentioned hospitals. My God, hospitals are being attacked with ransomware attacks, and a lot of them are coming from Russian organized crime. I don't know whether that money ends up, being commingled with the SVR's money, but
well, you actually have a really key point that because there are those 60,000 kids coming out each year and there aren't enough jobs for them, they can work independently as hackers, but when they're seen by the government as very good in Russia, then they get picked up and used on special projects. So it's a retail business until it becomes a government business. But the talent is being developed way faster there than it is here.
But if we had more hunters, hospitals and other organizations that have been suffering from ransomware attacks, that would improve their defenses, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would make it much, much harder, because they don't, it's not that they're just looking every day, they're setting up these scripts that are looking all the time. And so it becomes much harder to get your first foothold and to keep it very long. So yeah, these good hunters are really a wonderful defense. It's the only protection for power systems. You saw those outages in Ukraine. That stuff, if that attack hit the United States, we would be out for a long time. And the only defense against that is these hunters.
Right, but what we're talking about, the penetration of the Departments of State, Homeland Security, Commerce, Treasury, and the National Institutes of Health by the SVR, the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service. We don't know whether they got into classified systems, but they were essentially reading everybody's mail. That's cyber espionage. What happened in Ukraine, shutting down the grid, etc., that's cyber warfare, isn't it? And if the Russians cross that line, surely there'd be serious consequences.
There would be serious consequences if you could prove the organization that was doing it. But in a lot of those attacks, it's really hard to know whether it's the Russians or somebody like the Iranians trying to pretend they're the Russians to get us angrier at the Russians.
Well, what deterrence is there then?
Make it messy. I apologize.
But what can be done in terms of deterrence against, for example, the attack that we're talking about?
So the main thing, which is the simplest thing, there's a level of cyber hygiene that almost none of those agencies do religiously, and we've got to start getting to the point where we don't allow people to use computers if they're not basically configured safely. That's called cyber hygiene. That's the first step. That's boring. It's every day, and a whole lot of those federal agencies don't do it at all. They write reports about it, but they don't do it. And that's one. And then two is you get the best tools you can, and you put them in the hands of extraordinary hunters, and you've got yourself a defense.
Well, there's a lot of unemployment out there, Alan. You would think that this would be kids with cyber skills looking for a job. This ought to be an open market.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, but it has been filled with people who didn't have the technical chops to do it. Remember, I said only a few % of the people who try to get into cybersecurity have the chops to be hunters. So we need a much bigger funnel, letting every kid in the country try. And once they do, then we'll find enough to be able to defend ourselves.
And they should be well compensated, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Well, are you finding them at SANS? What's being done, in other words? This seems to be the simplest solution to what's just happened.
The Brits got ahead of us on this one. They recognized this about 3 years before we did, and they set up a program called Her Majesty's Government Cyber Discovery Program. And they had 200,000 kids play a game. Do you remember Bletchley Park? It's a game like that where you could find the kids who are going to be really good. And they found around that's where I got my 3%. They found around 3% could be made into these hunters. We've just started that as a nation. 25 governors announced Cyberstart America earlier this year. I think we're up to 10,000 relative to the Brits who are at 200,000. But if we could, if you know a kid who would like to work in this field, and it's a great field, tell him to go to Cyberstart America and try it. It takes half an hour to figure out whether you like it or not. But if they like it, they can really learn a lot. And
they can protect hospitals from losing all their data during a pandemic. I mean, it's important work. And vaccine developers from losing the formulas. Yes, they can do a lot. Well, Alan Paller, I thank you very much for joining us. You're welcome, Ian. And again, I've been speaking with Alan Paller, who's Director of Research at the SANS Institute, a graduate degree granting institution and the principal cybersecurity training school. Alan directs SANS research programs, including the widely used Internet Storm Center, the early warning system for the Internet, and the annual Greatest Risk in Cybersecurity study. And Alan has testified several times before both the House and the Senate. We're going to take a brief station break. We're back examining the Russian cyber attack